Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Razan Pereira. On June 20th, Prime Minister Modi, in a 165-minute virtual interaction with ministers, asked them to put the economy on a growth trajectory. For this purpose, he asked the ministers for ideas which can transform India into a global manufacturing hub. In the virtual interaction, the discussion was mainly about China and the manufacturing challenges faced by India. Earlier, the Prime Minister gave a mantra, vocal for local, during his address to the nation on May 12, 2020. The idea was to promote local brands and goods. He further stated that the brands which are global today were once local. More recently, the clamor has become louder to make in India and make India a global manufacturing hub, especially considering the China situation. In the 1980s, China began as a producer of low-end products, and in 2010, it became the largest manufacturer in the world, overtaking the US in all sectors, from drugs to electronics. In 2018, as per UN data, China accounts for 28% of the global manufacturing output. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze what needs to be done to make India a global manufacturing hub. Joining me on the program today are Shubhrakant Panda, Chair, Manufacturing Committee, FICCI, Ajit Ranade, Chief Economist, Aditya Birla Group, and Aruna Sharma, former Secretary, Ministry of Steel. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. So, Ms. Sharma, I'd like to begin the program with you. Let's first start and analyze and understand what is the status of manufacturing in our country as it stands today.
Let me be very, very clear and blunt about it. Unfortunately, over last number of years, the small manufacturers sort of metamorphosized themselves to become traders because of the tough labor laws, of expensive credit, of expensive power. They found it more lucrative to import from China and other countries and market it here. As far as the fast-moving goods are there, the branding does not make a difference. And that is how it went about. But assembly in electronics saw a big jump in the mobile sector in the country. And of course, in steel, we became number 2 in the world on steel manufacturing. Cement, we are strong. Aluminium, we are equally strong. But if you look, the major boost what the Prime Minister has been talking about has to be in the MSME sector, because that is where the major market lies and that is where it moves. And the Indian manufacturers lost a lot of space there to that of heavy imports, which were cheaper, better looking, fast rolling. And the reason behind it, like I said, an add-on reason was there was a complete lack of research in that sector. They were going on in the hackneyed manner, the market feedback, the modification of the goods, using better technologies, all that got missing. Now from there, this is an opportunity to restart, and that restarting is going to make the whole difference. And for that, you have to really work hard. In the sense, for every kind of manufacturer, you have to really sit with them and start removing every entangled things that is pinching them very badly. So it could be as simple as loading, unloading times. It could be as difficult as getting a new technology and machinery to go ahead with it. So this combinations has to be a very fast reactions. Otherwise, you know, we have what we lacked and what we lost the time. To accelerate and gain it, it requires a complete focused efforts, and which I am very sure my co-panelists who are very much in depth working for the manufacturing will be commenting much more about it.
Absolutely. Let me go across to them now and open the floor up to them as well, and let's hear their point of view really as far as making India a global manufacturing hub is concerned. First, Mr. Ranade, can India become a global manufacturing hub? What needs to be done? How can we become a powerhouse when we talk of manufacturing?
Well, the short answer is yes. And the long answer is that we need to take several steps. First of all, an acknowledgement of reality. While we have some really world-class stories to tell to the world, For example, the highest quality awards in manufacturing is called Deming Awards. We have the largest number of Deming Award winners in India outside of Japan. It's a Japanese quality award. Then if you look at the success of our automobile industry, the small car, India has virtually become like a small car hub, and one of the most successful operations of company Maruti Suzuki actually comes from India. And I could give you several other examples. So while that is true, the larger reality is that the share of manufacturing in GDP, in India's GDP, is today stuck at 16-17%. But this number in 1991, the year of our great liberalization and industrial delicensing, was also 16%. So over 30 years, we have not managed to move the needle from 16-17% higher. The national aspiration, as per the national manufacturing policy, is to go to 25%. So, we need to acknowledge what is, I think Dr. Sharma referred to some of them. We have success stories, so we need to learn from our own success stories, and we need to learn from other success stories. The most recent examples which have joined the race in the global, manufacturing competitiveness are countries like Vietnam and Bangladesh also in certain sectors like garments. So Vietnam is especially a very, very pertinent example. It's a country with 100 million people. Just 10, 12 years ago, it actually started from a very, very low base. But in a variety of sectors, whether it's electronics, whether it's assembly, whether it's garments, chemicals, it has really shown it's possible to have a sustained growth of almost 12 to 14% for a period of 10 years. What we need to do is, I think, four things. Let me just quickly identify four things. I think Dr. Sharma referred to a few of the handicaps. Number one is that we need to recognize that our strengths lie in labor costs and productivity skills. So we need to create large mega clusters, preferably near ports, which leverage on labor-intensive manufacturing sectors. Second, we need to aggressively work on policy matters, whether it's logistics costs or what Dr. Sharma said about loading unloading times, or moving stuff by road and rail, and what is called trade facilitation. So the third policy matter, I would say, and because I believe manufacturing is closely related to exports, we cannot be successful in manufacturing unless we are also successful in exports. So one of the handicaps has been our exchange rate policy. I believe our exchange rate tends to be somewhat overvalued, which is a handicap, disadvantage to Indian exporters, also Indian industry, because then industry has to reckon with cheap imports. If our exchange rate is strong, then imports look cheaper than domestic industry. So we need to work on that as well. And lastly, we need to also work very aggressively on market access. You see that the world is now kind of not following multilateral policies under WTO, but trade blocs. So we need to see Vietnam very recently signed the free trade agreement in Europe. I think EU, India, FTA would go a long way in promoting market access for us. We should also find out if we can do the same thing with the US markets. I know that we have a free trade agreement with ASEAN and we have walked out of RCEP. Perhaps there have been concerns on that side. But certainly, I think European markets to us represent a huge opportunity. So I would say these combinations of four things would go a long way.
Focus on our strengths and also probably get FTAs in place and in order so that it can help us on the whole is what the panelists are suggesting. Let me take another aspect forward with Mr. Panda. Mr. Panda, the industry we've seen over the past always asks for something really from the government and, look for more softs, look for more, incentives really. But then on the other side of the coin, you have several analysts, several experts suggest that, the government has done enough. It is now for the industry, or rather now it's time for the industry really to step up and deliver and do something on its own as well. What do you make of that? How do you assess it?
Well, from an industry perspective, I believe that whatever asks have been there, whether in general or at this point in time where, there is a global crisis of sorts, industry will always try to put forth its point of view and work in consonance with the government of the day to achieve really our targets. But what I'd like to also touch upon, I think excellent points have been made by both Mr. Sharma as well as Mr. Ranade. There are fundamental challenges which come in the way of India progressing towards becoming a manufacturing hub. So, things like land, labor, capital. So these are, challenges which have persisted for a while, which is why the statistic quoted by Mr. Ranade, which is that in 30 years we have, manufacturing as a share of GDP has stubbornly remained at 16%. So besides all of that, I think, I'd like to move away from SOPs and incentives and focus on something else, which is ease of doing business. I believe this government, under Prime Minister Modi, has done a lot of good work to make it easy for investments to come into India, for existing industries to do business. But I also believe that more can be done. Two points which come in the way, that there are a lot of archaic laws out there. And this is something that FICCI has consistently put across, even recently. A lot of work has been done in identifying and eliminating archaic laws, but I believe more can be done. And the second area, of course, is compliances. Just to give you an idea, I think an average Indian company has to go through something like 2,000 to 3,000 instances of compliances every year. And whereas you look at compatriots in Thailand or Vietnam, I believe that number is somewhere around 500. And so I think the need of the day is to actually look at the fundamental issues like land, labor, and capital, but also look at issues like compliances, which can be eased up. And by the way, by easing up on compliances, we are not saying allow a free run to companies to do as they wish, but follow the principle of trust but verify.
Okay, all right. So, taking the discussion forward, I want to take up a point that Mr. Ranade raised with you, Ms. Sharma, and talk about, success stories. One big success story as far as manufacturing in India is concerned, I strongly believe is, correct me if I'm wrong, of course, is the two-wheeler sector and how our Indian companies really have fared. They've even beat the Chinese companies at their own game, and we are really, a major manufacturing hub as far as two-wheelers are concerned. Is that a success story? Is that a model that can be replicated by others? Second, talking about success stories, these companies that are moving out of China seem to be going to Vietnam. Why is that so? Is there something that we can implement and take away from Vietnam?
Very rightly said. Like, if you look at the statements in the lead manufacturers of two-wheelers, and they have made quite strong public statements also into it. See, if you look at their whole chain, starting from the raw materials of steel to that of research, designing, making it, it has been sort of the whole link has modified and inputs have been very strong. They have taken the shocks of sudden changes in the policies of the kind of permissible two-wheelers in the market without enough notices to them to work upon it, but they managed to battle it out and move ahead. Their arguments or their gaining time was taken as if they are not sensitive about the pollution norms, which is not the true story. The manufacturing chain, or if you look at the entire assembly line, it takes time when you are going for a change. So these kind of changes, it is very, very important that you work together. And the success story happened there because the leaders in that sectors are innovative, are working toward it. Two-wheeler has a very big affordable rates and market within the country. So, the biggest advantage we have is we are big consumers. So in any manufacturing, the break-even will come by the local consumption itself to a very big way. And then you have a leeway for the export. So you're not so much, even though export is important, as Mr. Pandya very rightly said, but we are not export dependent. So even if protectionist measures came, we were able to take that shock as we were going ahead in the different sectors. So that is a success about the two-wheelers. Same what was very rightly said about the small cars by Mr. Ranade, that if you look at the small car manufacturer, India location advantage, the ease of doing business of giving them land down south, nearer ports, did stand to their advantage, that we became a big supply chain for the small cars in a very, very big way, whether it was Hyundai or Maruti. So both of them have captured the world imagination and the market as we are going ahead. But if we look at the replication of it in different sectors, and if you look at it that how we can trigger it off in the different sectors, we have known itching points Right, very well known. And somehow a delay in decision is hitting us. So it is not something which is not on the table. It is not something, there is a need to go back to the drawing board if the intention is to become a big manufacturing hub. The compliances. So compliances, if you look at it, it's quite based on mistrust, completely. If you look at the GST regime, so many applications, so many forms, starting from monthly, now shifting to quarterly, not shifting to quarterly, all these debates is hitting the MSMEs who can't afford to have a chartered accountant extra cost, who can't afford to go in for it, but they adopted digital very fast because it was a cost saving. So it's not
Right.
that they don't like technology or they're not open to absorb what new is coming. What they want is a little hand holding to them. And that is where you have seen very good results if you're going for it. Like India, if you look at it, our fast moving goods, like I said before, it got completely captured. Now garment, if you see why Bangladesh became one, it's Indian investors in Bangladesh. So you have to introspect, there is something wrong in ease of doing business. Why were
Right.
they tempted to go to Bangladesh and not have the same thing, maybe in eastern lines of India? We didn't, we prefer to cross the borders. So that is very, very important. And like you rightly said, the industries we thought of moving out of China, not actively moved. Very few have moving out. Others, the commerce is overtaking the politics. The Japanese companies want to stay back in China. So those who are moving out, why Vietnam is preferable? It's very simple. It's a single window. Just walk through understandable laws. Simple English, and that's what makes a difference. And that is where the sectors where somebody literally thought of resolving point by point issue, we saw growth in that sector. And one point I will not hesitate to say, there is a need of credibility and consistency in our policy making. Wherever we are consistent, we are seeing a better result. Where we do a somersault, then we take time to catch up again because the whole industry has to reset itself. So I agree to Mr. Ranade, it is possible for India to become a big manufacturing hub. But then this line should be written in capital in front of everybody so that every thought, every policy, every action, it is resonating it. And it is not holier than thou attitude. Right?
Okay, all right. Taking the discussion forward now, Mr. Ranade, how do we ensure that our products are competitive really as far as some of their peers outside are concerned? Because at the end of the day, it comes down to economics. Plain, simple fact, people want the cheapest and the best goods out there. So whoever can give it to them at a cheaper rate, they will go to them. Local for vocal and all of that, is a great slogan. It's good, but beyond the point, it comes down to economics.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Frank, that actually one key metric here is what is called R&D. Now, research and development is the responsibility not merely of the government, not merely of public sector companies, but also private sector companies. India's R&D spend in industry as a percentage of GDP is 0.7%. Our peer countries themselves, even Vietnam, they are spending almost 2%. What to speak of countries like Israel and some of the European countries? I don't even go there. So we need to at least double, not triple, I would say. We are spending 1.54 lakh crores, of which much of it is coming from the public sector. This needs to go up to 6 lakh crores. You see, you talked about competitiveness and quality. This cannot happen unless we make a commitment to R&D. The fantastic discussion we had about the two-wheelers, because what we forget is there was a whole ecosystem of developing ancillaries, developing the suppliers, the partnership with the Japanese quality movement. Let's not forget the Japanese have played a role in our evolution of the two-wheeler industry. But R&D was a very, very important part of it. So we have to spend more money on R&D. Now, what is required to promote R&D? It's not only tax policies. It has to go all the way up to our education system. Much more partnership between industry and academia. See, academia tends to be by themselves. We don't see enough academic industry partnerships in terms of projects, in terms of collaborations. And let's not forget that quality will come by competing in the exporting markets. I would say, as far as exports are concerned, there has to be a three-way partnership. Our diplomatic missions abroad, our industries ministry taking the lead along with other interministerial group, and our industry chambers like FICCI and CII. Mr. Panda and I, we are members of the industry association. So this three-way combination, the diplomatic missions should reach out to investors in those countries who are interested in setting up R&D facilities here. Our ministry should take the lead, industry, and our industry association will connect small and medium enterprises and companies to this effort. By the way, the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council has recommended that we set up 3,500 R&D hubs, export-oriented R&D hubs in the country. So I think if I have to give one short answer to your question about quality and cost, and ultimately the consumer is the final judge. I would just like to end by quoting Mr. Tim Cook, who is the chief executive of Apple, which is the most valuable company in the world. So, Apple turnover from China, despite all the height of the US-China trade war, there's so much heat and friction. But Apple turnover from China is $220 billion, $220 billion, of which $185 billion is exports from China. And he was asked, how come you're still in China? He said, I'm in China not for the low cost. I'm in China for the quality and the talent. So when you have that here, investors will come here for sure. So we need to promote that whole system and culture. I think R&D,
Absolutely.
academia, industry linkage is the key.
We need an entire ecosystem really, and we need a systemic change if we need to become a global manufacturing hub, is what Mr. Ranade is suggesting. Taking the discussion forward now, Mr. Panda, you spoke about archaic laws in your opening remarks. Now, this is something that always comes up when we talk about manufacturing, this issue of labor laws and the entire, labor issue that we have. Your thoughts on that, and do you believe that we need major labor reforms as well if we have to become the kind of manufacturing hub and that the Prime Minister dreams for us?
Yes, I do. So let me split up the archaic laws into two sections. One is more fundamental, such as labor laws, and that is something that will take a little bit of doing. But you can skin the cat in many different ways. I mean, for example, the fixed employment policy, which has come into place a couple of years ago, is a very good move, because when we talk about labor reform and labor laws, the immediate hue and cry is about hire and fire policy. I don't think it necessarily boils down to hire and fire. I mean, it can be looked at in different ways. How do you provide flexibility to industries to scale up employment when there is demand, and not be stuck with a high level of employment if there is a downturn of any sort? That is the essential aspect of it. So yes, I mean, if you Mr. Ranade talked about a cluster approach to manufacturing, ideally located next to ports, so that logistics are simple and all of that. I mean, if we take that concept a little bit forward and say that, look, how do we, at least in those clusters, make labor laws a little bit little less onerous, while of course ensuring that adequate protection is there so that no one is exploited. The second aspect that I would like to get into, in as much as archaic laws are concerned, is there are a whole host of other laws and compliances besides labor laws. And I mean, there are some outright archaic ones. I mean, we have recently come across something while doing a research paper, that there is actually a rules dating back to 1963, I believe, which is called the Maternity Benefits for Circus and Mines rules. I mean, why is that there in the statute in the first place, right? But even if you look at something like the Factories Act, which is really now the all-encompassing approach to regulating how industrial establishments run. I mean, there are myriad provisions in there, such as how many times urinals should be whitewashed in a year, and the answer, by the way, is 4. And what is the capacity of the buckets required to fight fire, which is 9 liters. So we have to get away from that prescriptive approach to allowing a little flexibility. I endorse the point that Arunaji made about that there is a mistrust in when laws are formulated, which is why I use that famous terminology of trust but verify, because there are lots of inspections and approvals which are given on a quarterly basis, on an annual basis. Now, I firmly believe that that is something that can move towards self-certification, with a random check, so that nobody is misusing the provision of self-certification to have an unsafe operation which is going on, and have exemplary punishment if somebody is misusing that freedom. But we really have to move from mistrust to an approach of trust but verify.
Okay, time now to get closing comments from all my guests with the best way forward. I've got limited time on the program, 3 minutes left. So in 1 minute each, I'm going to get closing comments from all my panelists, starting first with you, Ms. Sharma. Best way forward.
The best way forward is that be very clear that yes, it is possible. And to be possible, what all boxes are to be ticked should be ticked. And those boxes has to be very introspective, not defensive, and aiming towards getting it. There are 10 sectors which I have identified where we have a holistic approach. So whether we become the highest producer in agriculture, whether the second one we go for a step up, value addition in the rural India itself. Number 3 is mining and its related value addition in terms of steel, aluminium, bauxite, mines, whatever we want to go in for. Then the fourth one, which is very, very important, is the food security aspect of it, that how do we go about it. Fifth is the MSMEs, and MSMEs need a different handling. Now, if you look at it, even the moratorium was not used. The use of moratorium is coming down to 30% because there is no back-end moratorium into it. So MSMEs have to be taken and their small problems have to be handled. They have to be helped, handled into clusters. Like that, if you look at it, if we focus on 8 to 10 sectors as a whole, and then you go ahead by support in the education and social protections, it's not impossible. It is possible. But then the intention has to be very focused, clear, with everybody working on a team to sort of work towards it and start ticking the boxes that whatever is needed to be done is done. As we succeed in a private life, as we succeed in a professional life, we have to do exactly the same thing at the national level.
Okay, all right. Mr. Ranade.
Well, number one, go in mission mode. Just like we had, livelihood mission, we had the national health mission. This should be a mission mode. So co-opt everybody. As I told you, as far as exports are concerned, our diplomatic missions, the ministry taking the lead, the industry chambers, but co-opt the state government as well. Second, cluster approach. Locate close to the ports and labor-intensive sectors. Number 3, which is agriculture, textiles, even tourism, which is not really manufacturing, but it's labor-intensive. Leather, footwear, garments. Number 3, please don't be aware of the exchange rate policy. Let it not become our disadvantage. And number 4, R&D. Let's not forget the importance of R&D. If necessary, the CSR law allows companies to spend on R&D, but not all activities covered. Let's expand that thing completely. Let's aim to double R&D from 0.7 to 1.4%. And lastly, just like for ease of doing business, we went from rank 142 to rank 63. It was also a mission mode. Let's make it a mission mode to increase our share of manufacturing from 17% to 20% in the next 3 years.
All right. And Mr. Panda, close the show for us with a quick concluding remark.
A lot of policy prescriptions have been made. Let me add one more, which is focus on Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is what the Honorable Prime Minister has asked for. I don't see that as being protectionist. I see that as going into mission mode to ensure that we in a targeted manner look to become more self-reliant. And I think there's a huge difference between being protectionist and being self-reliant, and the latter is what we are aiming for. And to give you just one example, it's abominable that with one of the world's largest reserves of coal, we are still importing coal. So, you can start at something very basic like that. We don't even have to talk about moving up the value chain. That can come, 6 months later, a year later. But we have to move into an overdrive approach to see that, where is it that we can easily, painlessly switch over to being self-reliant and use that as the basis for growth.
Okay, all right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that we need to focus on our strengths and learn from our success stories. We need to make well thought out and just the basic decisions like ensuring that our plants are located close to ports, thereby saving a lot of money on transportation and other aspects. MSMEs need a different kind of a treatment, maybe some kind of hand holding, but we need to have an ecosystem or create an ecosystem with all stakeholders coming on board and taking this forward on a mission mode is what the panelists are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.